Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Eirik and welcome to my studio. It's been a few weeks since I've posted a new video on this project, PT or Empyrean. The sculpture is now finished and my interest in it ran out a bit. So I decided to take a few weeks off where I made some different videos dealing with different things, hopefully to come back more refreshed and ready. Which is the case. I am back, I'm refreshed and I'm ready. At this stage, pretty much everything is there except the arms and the hands, of course, and the ears, and a little bit of the feet. So the only thing left to do is to render the surface, really. Of course, while you render, you'll discover things that need to be solved, or you see shape design that perhaps aren't up to par. When there's a limited time frame to your project, you might not get to do a lot of work that I ended up doing here, so, keep this in mind. I can work on this as long as I want, and I really did. I think the real separation between passable and good sculpture is the amount of work that's being put in. And in my case here, it's the specific work that's happening right now is making a huge difference. It's tiny things that doesn't really show up very well on video, which is obviously a bit of a problem considering that this is video, which is why the footage is so sped up, so that you can actually see things getting done. Because the last 100 hours of work are really being done once the sculpture reaches this stage. Increasing the resolution clarifies the forms and the design you have built. It also brings the sculpture one step closer to appearing like your model and less like a sculpture on its own. So the ambiguity begins to disappear. And this is the real test of how well you've set yourself up. If the sculpture starts falling apart here, metaphorically speaking, of course, not literally falling apart, but metaphorically speaking, then if it starts falling apart, you've set yourself up poorly. It could be several things causing this to happen. Most glaring and most obvious will be the shape design. Are the shapes that you designed and made and blocked in clicking together nicely, or are they stacked on top of each other like bricks? This can, if you're observant and pay attention, be dealt with while blocking the sculpture in. It should be dealt with while the sculpture is being blocked in, I should say. But perhaps it hasn't been dealt with as successfully as you thought or as successfully as it should have been. And this becomes painfully obvious when you increase the resolution of your surface, when you start cleaning up your surface. I'm not only talking about how forms click together in a two-dimensional, flat way. That's easy enough to achieve, and all it really requires is a keen open eye looking for and spotting the differences between the model and your sculpture. I'm talking about how the forms fit together in a three-dimensional way. Something we at the Academy, something that Mitch and I came up with, and we call it divine topography. Which probably should be a video on its own because it's really complex. To describe it as simply as possible, it is how the forms fit together like a three-dimensional puzzle. It's a very tough thing to describe properly, and I think I need to gather my thoughts and make a full-length video on it. Just keep in mind that there's more to sculpture than fitting forms together on a two-dimensional or barely three-dimensional plane. Not only do things fit together in that fashion, but they also come out, and they also head in. And it's like this crashing of waves almost, but instead of having the ocean with rolling waves, it's like a mess of waves coming from all different angles at the same time. And this has to click together really nicely, as well as the two-dimensional aspect of it. If you've designed your shapes well, things will improve as you increase resolution. The keen-eyed sculptor will have set himself up for success and not be caught by surprise by the way his forms click together once he cleans up the surface. Transitions will also be exposed for what they are when you clean up the surface. Usually these are easy enough to tend to, and it's somewhat of a simple matter of just adding clay to soften the transition, or digging in a little bit to make them a little bit sharper, or adding clay to a form to make it create a sharper transition. Important thing to keep in mind here is that there is a hierarchy to the transitions. All transitions need to work with the others, creating a hierarchy of values from light to dark. Now in this scale, there's a lot of different values. And if you're working in a smaller scale, you probably want to compress those to a fewer number. And if you work in a larger scale, you want even more different values, ranging from light to dark. This can be set up earlier in the process, and usually it is to a certain extent. And usually it probably should be as well. When you take your sculpture from rough block-in with too much space and depth in between every form and begin filling the transitions in slowly, while redrawing and readdressing your shape design, you begin addressing your transitions by necessity as well. I believe I spoke about this in the previous video on this series. But your transitions will likely need to be addressed again because of volumes. The hardest thing to anticipate and be well set up for, I think, is volume. The lack of volume usually only becomes painfully apparent when all other aspects of the sculpture is at a high level. You can anticipate it, you can definitely get better at anticipating at least, but I've found that usually you'll end up needing more than what you think you need, and more than what you will have set yourself up for. And this is the reason we always tell our students at the Florence Academy to finish the work 1 or 2 weeks before their deadline, especially when they do bigger projects where volume and modeling are a serious part of the project. You finish it 1 or 2 weeks before the deadline, and then you reassess your finished sculpture. That usually means adding volume to it, and then you finish it again. And your lack of volume usually only becomes obvious once you almost finish your sculpture, and part of that is of course cleaning up the surface. Cleaning up the surface will also reveal where there are glaring volumetric mistakes by revealing forms that have very sharp or very angular transitions between shadow and light. Now imagine you clean the surface to utmost perfection, a glass or metallic-like finish. Every single little blemish or volumetric mistake would stand out like a sore thumb. If the form didn't turn in a very, very smooth way, if there are any angles, and it's a glassy smooth surface, all those angles would be very, very obvious. So increasing the resolution of a piece is very risky, as it reveals all your volumetric mistakes. Now, this is of course an opportunity to deal with those mistakes as well and improve your sculpture. And that's what you kind of should take away from this, I think. Volumetric considerations are very hard to anticipate, and usually means the transition will need some reworking as well, as the volumes around the transitions will change the value of the transitions themselves. They're all part of the same thing, really. If you don't deal with your volumes, you'll commit the cardinal sin of sculpture, which is creating a flat sculpture. Okay, let's have a little philosophical talk about sculpture. Sculpture is by its very nature not an illusion, and this sets it apart from painting. Painting is an illusion. It's a magic trick. It's a two-dimensional representation of the three-dimensional world. Sculpture, however, is not an illusion. It is real, and it occupies the same space that we humans, and all other living things for that matter, occupy. Now, of course, keep in mind that I am biased. I'm a sculptor, but I believe that because of this, I see sculpture as the highest form of art. Real creation, not an illusion, and not a magic trick. Painters have a multitude of tools at their disposal to create their illusions. Atmosphere, perspective, color. As sculptors, we have one tool: space. But space is an incredibly powerful tool. If used well, which is why I said the cardinal sin of sculpture is creating flat sculpture, because you have to use it well. So if used well, your sculpture should occupy as much space as possible. Why would you ever not take serious advantage of the one tool, the one advantage sculpture as an art form has? A large part of this video is me blocking in the arms. Now we'll get to the hands, don't worry, I'll make a whole video on how to deal with the hands later. Everything not connected to the main body, like the arms, and everything not dealing with the balance of the figure are to me accessories. Important, but not important at the same time. They won't make or break your sculpture. Other things take precedent over them, which is why I wait to build the arms until those areas that take precedent have been worked out and are functioning well. Just as with the main body, we want to underbuild the arms while we block them in. And here's why. The arms are narrow, there is no space for mistakes, and overbuilding is very hard to compensate for. If you overbuild the arms, they will very, very easily turn into fat, uninteresting sausages. And so to avoid this, you need to block them in with care, quickly switching gears from blocking in the contours to carefully considering the direction of your contour, which essentially means turning your contours into the forms, which is what the contours is. They're a series of forms making up the contour when considered in a flat two-dimensional way. When blocking in the body, we can grow outwards for a long time until we reach the borders, giving us ample time to adjust the direction of our contours, turning them into forms and internal information from one view, and dealing with the accuracy of them as contours in a two-dimensional view from another view. The body is wide and affords us time to observe while slowly getting closer and closer to our overall widths. The arms are narrow and affords us no such time. Very quickly does the sculpting of an arm go south if the direction of the contours and the forms making up the contours is not considered, observed, and executed. And hands and fingers are even worse, leaving almost no room, but we'll talk about hands and fingers in a few weeks. We have spoken before about how to observe the body from 4 different views, front, back, and the 2 sides, and how to connect all 4 views. The arms can be tricky because they won't always follow the body, and it's not always that the 4 views used to observe the body are optimal for observing the arms. And the same thing goes for the balance leg. In the balance leg, I treat the knee as the front view, the back of the knee as the back view, and the 2 sides are 90 degrees to the front and the back view of the knee. And doing it this way means that it won't matter if the balance leg moves, or if I decide to have my balance leg in a slightly different place than what my model had. I can always get back to these views, locating the front of the knee, for example, and observing my balance leg from there. So this means there is consistency in my observation, as I can always get back to the same place and I'm not chasing my model. The same thing goes for the arms. I usually treat the elbow as one view, and then every other view is just 90 degrees around, just like with the balance leg. This means that I can adjust where my elbow is aimed, thus moving the arm and still observe it and sculpt it faithfully and with consistency. If I didn't do it this way, it would be hard to get back to the same place day after day after day, and my observations would change from day to day, making it impossible to differentiate between a mistake in the sculpting and a mistake in the observation. Being able to observe from the same place and observe the same thing day after day reveals truth to us. A sculpture is 1,000 moments in time, compressed and collected into a single object. Now for you watching this, it might seem redundant to put this amount of hours into the sculpture that I am doing here, 100 extra hours almost after the model has left. And it probably feels that way, or looks that way, because the sculpture looks pretty good. With the exception of the missing elements, of course. But there needs to be more than just mere satisfaction with getting close. You need to be a little bit more tenacious than that. Very often have I worked on a piece and gotten close and then I've settled. And I'm always super disappointed with myself a few weeks after, but then it's too late. I think even in my last sculpture that I'm quite fond of, or I'm okay with it at least, and people seem to like it. And I still did that, And I almost did it here as well several times. Sculpting, it really takes a lot of energy, and it really takes it out of you. But there is something to willing something into existence, demanding nothing short of the very best that you're capable of at the moment, and then going a bit further than that even. And I see that and I admire it tremendously in the work of artists that I love. It's almost universal that this is one of the qualities that they have. And this can be in any field, it doesn't have to be sculpture, of course. Musicians, for example, who treat their music with such a demand for perfection that even the CD packaging gets untold hours of work put into it. Now that's some serious inspiration right there. Or sculptors who push the envelope and with every single piece they make, they get further and further, making their body of work better and better. And I want to put more effort into doing the same thing and treat my work the same way. And I had to remind myself several times while doing this sculpture not to stop and demand that level of excellence from myself. You have to welcome and ensure that every sculpture, every creative endeavor becomes a creative fistfight. Your artistic integrity depends on it. And if not every work is better than the last, then what is this really for? Why are you even doing this? Okay, thank you for watching. That's it for this week's episode. Next week, I think I'll do a video on painting resin sculptures with acrylic colors, and you can check out my Instagram, because I just did some of that, if you're interested in looking. Painting with acrylic on top of resin is an excellent way to create a finished product quite fast. Oil is a lot slower, so if you're in a time crunch, acrylic it is. Leave some questions below in the comments if you have them. We'll do a Q&A video again soon as well, so leave some questions to help me out with that. And if you would like to jump ahead of the YouTube videos and see how this sculpture looks finished, you can do so on my Instagram page, which there is a link to in the description below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, I encourage you to check out my Patreon page. I give feedback and critiques on people's work, and we talk about whatever you need help with in your sculpting endeavors. There are several rewards, one of them being the maquette for this very sculpture you've seen me working on today. So check it out, the link is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for a new video next Thursday. Subscribe and hit the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and share with your friends and family. It really helps me out a lot. Thank you for watching, stay creative, and I hope to see you in the next one.